Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Unconfined Conversations with Ryan and Steve. I'm Ryan. This is my main man, Steve, here for episode 8. So, before we get started with today's episode, for the last few months, we've really spoken about recognizing families and their incarcerated loved ones for the separation that they have experienced through the holiday season with Thanksgiving and Christmas. And now, we've gone through Thanksgiving, we've gone through Christmas, but we should absolutely continue to recognize the separation, despite the fact that, holidays are important to a lot of folks, right? But the loved ones are missed.
All the time. 365 days a year.
100%. And so, we don't want it to seem as if, we're only highlighting the absence or the separation during the holidays. It's all the time.
Sure.
And it's hard all the time, not only on the families, but also on the incarcerated individual as well. And so we just want to really make sure to continue to mention that and to highlight that and to recognize that, there are hardships going on within family dynamics, within family structures, friendship structures, and we just want to encourage those who are in the middle of that to stay encouraged.
Sure.
So today, we're not going to talk about our shirts. Last week we talked about our shirts and the fact that I had to go up in size from a 2X to a 3X. But I think this week I'm all right. I'm not quite a tomato in this red shirt. I don't think. I was going more for Tiger Woods Victory Red on Sundays.
That works.
It does work. We'll see how much victory we have today after we have today's topic. So today's topic is something that, we haven't really spoken about a lot here on Unconfined Conversations. We've maybe alluded to it very briefly, but what we want to talk about today is something called the company that you keep, and how important that is to the direction that one's life can take, both while a person is incarcerated and also after the person is released.
Especially as the person is released.
Even especially. You're absolutely right, Steve. Especially after a person is released. And I think the reason why that we can say especially is because in prison, it can be a little easier to make sure that you're hanging around the right people, all these other kind of things, because it's not the people that you necessarily grew up around. It's not the people that necessarily influenced you to commit the crime or the people that you were with when you committed your crime in order to get to prison. Once you're released, now you're back in the same neighborhoods, the same cities, the same family and friend circles as what you once were. And those are the same influences that predicated your incarceration. And that's why we can say, especially after a person gets out.
Yeah, what I see is that people have almost the same expectation of you 21 plus years ago. We knew this person X amount of time ago, and we anticipate that same level of violence, mistrust, behavior, what have you. And to your point, the people that you associate with on the inside, positive or negative, those people have the tendency to really influence your life as you're incarcerated, as you're living your day-to-day life in there, because these are the people we were just talking about earlier before we started, people that you go to eat with, people that you go to rec with, people that you walk the track with, people that you go to services with and, class and what have you. Those people, they really rub off on you. They really begin to basically imprint themselves on you unknowingly.
Yeah, and unknowingly on their part, but also on your part too. Like you may not even realize that they are imprinting upon you, right? And I want to use like a scientific analysis or analogy here, right? If anybody remembers any parts of their science class when they were in school, you may remember some parts of biology where it talks about osmosis, right? And what osmosis is, and I'm not a scientist, and I was in school a long time ago, if that tells you anything about how old I am. But from what I remember, osmosis can very simply be described as when one thing is in direct contact with another, and that one thing then helps to change or evolve the other thing. So when we hang around people, their behaviors, their words, how they speak, their decisions, and the types of people that they associate with, but also their goals, their efforts, their character, all of those things can directly influence us when we associate with them on a regular basis. So if someone has good character, if they have goals that they're trying to achieve, if they create positive change within themselves, if they treat others as they would want to be treated themselves, all those types of really good positive things will start to rub off on you. Vice versa, on the other hand, if someone is making bad decisions all the time, if they have a not great of a character, maybe they don't treat people very well, maybe they make terrible decisions, that type of behavior and decision making will start to rub off on you too if you associate with that person long enough. And so it really comes down to, what do we want to aspire to for ourselves? How do we see ourselves? We say, well, I want to be up here. I want to have good character. I want to make good decisions. I want to be different from what I once was. Okay, so part of it is our own determination, but an equal part of it certainly can be attributed to who we associate with.
For sure. It kind of reminds me of somebody I ran into recently. I haven't seen him in 12 years, and I got a call yesterday, and he told me that he was in town, and he's wondering if I can come and see him and his family up at the hospital. And I made time and went up there, and I hadn't seen this person in 12 years. And I walked up, and we gave each other a big hug. This is a brother that I walked with while incarcerated. This is a man that I walked with while incarcerated. And he, at the time when I knew him, was very immature. And a lot of us other brothers who walked with him would constantly be on his case, giving him some form of loving correction, some form.
So you guys cared about him enough to be able to say, "Hey, man, like you need to start straightening out here."
Absolutely. Like it was day one. As soon as a lot of us see him, he's got likable character, very funny, very helpful, very kind, but at the time very immature. And fast forward 12 years, and this man's giving me a hug, and he was basically the first to say anything. And he told me, he said, "I long for the day when I would see you on the outside." And today's the day. I've been out for 3 years, and we just haven't connected. But he said, "I long for the day when I would see you because I wanted to tell you." And he told me tearfully, and we both cried. He said, "You changed my life." And maybe I didn't see it or say it then or appreciate it then, but I thank you for walking with me. I thank you for encouraging me. I thank you for trying to share with me the things that you gleaned from your experience up until that point. I think I had been in 6 years before he came in with a pretty lengthy sentence. And, just like I said, just some of us recognizing, this brother's young, And yes, he's immature, but he needs good company. He needs somebody to encourage him. And all these years later, it's like I reflected upon that moment, and I've thought about it since then. And I've shared with people. It's like sometimes you don't understand the work that you're really involved in until you see the fruit of your labor all these years later. And before Ryan and I started this evening, I told him, I said, that same sentiment. I shared that with him earlier. And I mean that. You know, us sitting here having this conversation about this weighty subject of incarceration, of rehabilitation, of care, of concern, of investing into your fellow human being, you know, like you don't see the true impact of our actions today. And I think those will come years down the road, and I'm okay with that.
Do you think that when we're in the middle of, because both you and I kind of had a similar role in prison as far as, it wasn't right away, but we grew into becoming mentors, becoming leaders, becoming
peer appointed.
Yes, peer
That's
appointed.
so important. I tell people that a lot.
Yes.
Like, you don't understand, who this man was in the community, in the prison system, and I applaud him, because that was a peer appointed position, as was with me, that my peers around me said, we want this brother to lead. We want this brother to lead. I don't take that lightly, and neither does this man.
Well, it's a lot of responsibility, that's for sure. And there's a lot of weight that goes with that. And, when you're in the middle of that, when you're in the middle of leadership, mentorship, guiding people, influencing people,
teaching,
we didn't really realize it at the time because it wasn't a term back then, but we were kind of influencers in a way. Maybe had we had Snapchat or Facebook or TikTok, we'd have been making TikToks and all those kind of things. But we were absolutely influencers. And when we're in the middle of it, we don't really take on the full weight of those types of conversations,
How can you?
Those types of interactions. We're just doing it because it's the right thing to do, and we know that we can positively influence or impact another human being's life. Especially when it's noticeable that they need something like that, just like in the example of the young man that you just mentioned. And we don't really realize the impact of it, and we don't really notice that until we see the fruit of it, where later on they'll say, hey, this is what our interactions did for me in my life. And that's a really great example of someone who was flawed, who, even despite the interaction and the friendship that you had with him, he still continued to have flaws. He still continued to make sometimes bad decisions and, be involved with people that were not good influences on him. However, the interaction and involvement with you ultimately, with age, in his case, took root and started to overcome those other bad influences. And now, how long has he been out?
12 years.
12 years that this man has been out. And he's engaged. He has children.
Grandchildren
Grandchildren now.
Grandchildren on the way, twins.
That's really an amazing thing.
Oh, man.
All from an interaction with someone who was positive, someone who was positively influential. And, that's kind of what we're talking about here, is when you associate with people who have strong character, who are trying to be the best person that they can possibly be, people who are making good decisions, it will rub off enough on another human being.
Osmosis.
Through osmosis, that it will create a change in behavior, in speech, in attitude, in outlook, in all these kind of things. And you and I have also seen examples of the other side of that. Mm-hmm. We've seen examples of people, yes, absolutely, sadly. Because, we've heard people say, well, I need to do things differently, and, I don't want to come back to prison anymore, and I don't want to, be an abuser anymore. I don't want to be whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And yet they still associate with the type of people who will influence or cater to that type of behavior. Mm-hmm. And they never venture beyond that. And some of it, you mentioned the word peer before. Mm-hmm. Some of it has to do with peer pressure.
Yeah.
Because someone can be guilted into not associating with people that have good character.
Right.
Because you'll hear from their peers, those individuals will hear from their peers, what are you, a square?
Yeah.
You gonna hang out with that guy? You gonna hang out with the goody two shoes?
Right.
What, you're not down anymore? They'll hear those things, those messages, mm-hmm. and it will guilt them into holding themselves back. It will guilt them into getting outside of their comfort zone and associating with somebody that they know can be a good influence on them. Mm-hmm. And that's really a shame that happens.
It is a shame, and I think one of the most important time in an inmate's life as you go into the Department of Corrections, the most important time is that first month and a half. And in that time, you are in what is often referred to as the fish tank, or admission and orientation.
Yep, admissions and orientations.
A&O. And that time, and then I would say shortly thereafter, so when you get classified and where they send you to general population or the facility that you're going to be at, that time is the most important, because you should decide there. You should. And that's when you should set the pace or the tone for how you're going to do time. Who you're going to associate with, who you're not going to associate with. And I would say for a decent number, I can't necessarily quantify it for you, but for a decent number, I think people make their minds up. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. This is who I'm going to associate with. This is who I'm not going to associate with. This is what I'm going to learn. This is what I'm going to unlearn. Treatment. They make that decision, and they begin to be resolved while they're in those positions or those places in life.
Do you think that starts there? And the reason I'm asking you is because with you specifically, you have mentioned in talking about your own story and your own testimony that's exactly the moment where you decided, mm-hmm. hey, I need to do something different mm-hmm. with my attitude, with my associations, with my outlook and how I feel about myself. I need to do something different. You did it during that critical period, mm-hmm. and it worked for you. So what do you think drives that decision with people who are in the same time frame, where they're just getting into the prison system, they're in the admissions and orientations part of the prison, they're getting classified? What drives a measurable amount of people to make that decision where they're saying, hey, I'm at a tipping point here of either one way or the other, mm-hmm. and I need to choose this. Mm-hmm. And they consciously choose to make these changes, including who they associate with. What do you think drives that?
I'm going to use two words. I'm going to talk about both sides. So the first word that I'm going to use is fear. People in that position, I was there, people who are in that position, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of trepidation, there's a lot of angst that you have while you're in that position. What's going to happen to me? Am I going to be beat up? Am I going to be raped? Is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? Whatever it is that people think about, all the imaginations. And it's fear-based. And consequently, they make a terrible decision to associate with bad company. And bad company can be something as simple as an attitude, a mindset, cliquish. I would even say people who want to be a part of an association or a gang culture. You know, it's fear-based. Like, I don't want those things to happen to me, so I'm going to click up. I'm going to get involved with a group. And I know this isn't a popular subject, but I'm qualified to say this because I've worked with many men who have been under that persuasion for years. I grew up with these, they're now men, but they were kids when I knew them, on the schoolyard of all places. And we just kept wrong associations and joined things that we probably shouldn't have joined. And then consequently, that led us to prison where we kept those associations. We were fearful to get away from them. All right, so that's one side, fear. Whereas the opposite side is faith. You know, you still have those feelings. There's anxiety, there's angst, there's trepidation in my heart. But I think things could be different for me getting out. I think that I can start focusing on changing my life. I think I can start learning. I think I can start, you know, that guy seems like and this is the cool thing about the system as well, is that there's brothers who are educated in there. And I think one of the greatest things you can do is spend time, particularly track time, recreation time, going to service, going to chow. You know, spend time with somebody who literally is formally educated, because they will start to teach you lessons of life. You know, we talk about that osmosis. That's a real thing. As you're walking with these men who have been blessed or fortunate enough to receive their education, like their degrees and stuff, they share things with you that you wouldn't know otherwise, especially if you're keeping company with people who didn't graduate, have learning issues. I'll just say it like that. Learning issues, and people who dog others out who want to do good, who want to do right, who want to change their life. And it's like, you're going to let them influence your life? You know, it's just a question.
So when you and I went in, you know, I went in the late 90s. Mm-hmm. You came in the early 2000s, mm-hmm. Which wasn't that far apart from when I went in with you, and it was within just a few years. Mm-hmm. So the same type of prison dynamic was there for both of us, as far as there weren't a lot of young men. There were some who were under the age of 18. There were some who were under the age of 21. Even more who were under the age of 25. Mm-hmm. But mostly older guys who had been in the system for a very long time. And we've talked on this platform before about mentorship and mm-hmm. about all those kind of things, right? And one of the things that I noticed as I got older was that, and it's due to a lot of things which we won't get into here, but the percentage of young men who made up the prison population, that percentage started to grow mm-hmm. from what you could count on maybe 5 hands. Now it's measured in the hundreds mm-hmm. of men who are under the age of 25, mm-hmm. Hundreds who are under the age of 21. Mm-hmm. And because of that, when you and I went in, we were so young. I was 16, you were 18. Mm-hmm. We didn't have people in our own peer group to really associate with.
That's right.
It was mainly older guys. But now there are way more young men in there who can look across the tier, who can look across the chow hall and see other young men who are the same age as them. The peer group is much, much larger. So then they gravitate towards the influence from their own peer group. And I started to notice that which I was just doing what I was always doing, which was mentoring, mm-hmm. that a lot of young men were rejecting that mentorship. They were rejecting advice, whatever, in lieu of what their peers were influencing them with, which was not the case when you and I went in. You and I went in. We listened to the older guys. We heard what they had to say. We respected them because of their position. But it's just not really the case anymore. And it's not an all-encompassing case. There are some exceptions to that, obviously. Right. But the dynamic is absolutely different. And you can see through the conditions within the prison and the social dynamics that are in there, but also in recidivism rates and things like that, that people are, a larger percentage of people are choosing to associate with people who are still making bad decisions. And it's really only because of social pressures, of peer pressures, of people saying, what are you going to listen to those old guys for, right? It's just becoming harder and harder for older guys to mentor the younger guys because of that different dynamic, right? And, we can see more violence. We can see more, cliquish type activities, and possibly even more recidivism. There was a young man that I was mentoring in there, and he loved to listen to what I had to say. We had lots of wonderful conversations. But once he got out, he was back with people within his own age group in the mid to late 20s. And far and few between did he ever call me, want to hang out, want to talk. But when we would talk, he'd be like, man, thank you, big brother. Thank you for talking to me. But he's not hanging out with other people who are more positive influences with him. He's still hanging out with people who are influencing him in the way that people were influencing him before he went to prison. And so he's not doing very good. He's doing quite poor. He's at a point in his life where he's back to using drugs. He's making all sorts of terrible decisions. He can't keep a job. And some of that can be traced back to who he decided to associate with the most. And that's kind of what we're talking about here, is how important it is with who you associate with can really hinge the direction of your life.
Right. I will also say that as much as our audience is, we've got a targeted audience here. We have either people who have been through the system or people who have known someone who has been in the system, through the system, about to go to the system, whatever. But really, we're talking about a larger subject, which is just there has to be a willingness. There has to be a determination in one's heart to say, you know what? I have to do this. It's upon me to do this. See my friend yesterday, that really encouraged me. As much as I cried, as much as it hurt, as much as all those emotions that I went through, it really just reminded me of the importance of this work. It really did. It reminded me that I made a difference. And before you think of me just taking all this credit for myself, I'm not. By God's will, I was in that position in life to be able to influence that young man. So I say credit be to the Lord Jesus Christ for influencing my life and then allowing me to influence somebody else's life. So I'll say that. But I think that if we are intentional today about the decisions that we're making to be a mentor, to be an influencer in the most positive respect of that word, to be a positive influencer for good, for change, for maturity, for growth, for the sake of a family member. I thank God that my brother is different now for the sake of his grandchildren. That's so important to me, to say, I know that one man, as difficult as it was sometimes to see him make the decisions that he did, I now, 12 years later, get to watch him being a grandfather, to his grandchildren and loving them and being present, which is so important. He wouldn't be any of those things if he said, you know what, Steve, you don't know what you're talking about. You're 2 years older than me. Like, how much wisdom do you have? And not that he hinged on my wisdom, but how mature can you be? And I'm speaking of that negatively. If he asked that question and decided, I'm going to go with this crowd instead and not be around people who just want to influence me for positive or for good, I would have missed that opportunity that I had yesterday. It was a blessing. It blessed my heart. It encouraged me in my heart, to see this man out here living his life, being a productive member of society. And to me, that makes this work worth it. Absolutely.
It absolutely does. And I think you bring up a really great point, is the direction that a person goes in their life. Does some of it have to do with the company that they keep? 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Keyword some.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of the onus is absolutely on the individual.
Mm-hmm.
To make that decision to say, I need to be different. I need to be the best man that I can be to my children, to my family, to my community, to the people I'm responsible for. I need to be, and to myself,
mm-hmm.
I need to be the best person that I can possibly be. So what do I need to do in order to facilitate that? I need to do this, and I need to do this. And part of that is I need to change the type of company that I keep.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be successful and you want to be a winner in your life, if you have financial aspirations, if you have social aspirations, if you have religious and faith-based aspirations, then you associate with the people who have already gotten there,
mm-hmm.
and glean their influence from them.
That's right.
I gave you an analogy before we got on the air here, that there was once a young man who came to me for workout advice. I used to lift weights, and I used to be much bigger than what I was. Well,
bigger than you are now?
Well, in some ways.
I'm kidding.
America, help me out here. So I used to lift weights a lot, and I was pretty big, and I used to compose workouts for my workout crew and all those kind of things. And this young man came up to me, and he wanted some advice on like an arm workout to get his biceps and triceps bigger. And I said, okay. I said, well, what are you doing? And he told me what he was doing. I said, okay, well, where'd you learn that from? He said, well, this person over here gave me this workout to do. I said, does that guy have big arms? Which, by the way, this guy did not have big arms. He had some of the smallest arms out there. And he was like, well, no, not really. I said, so then why are you getting an arm routine from this guy who has little arms? You should go to the guy on the weight pile that has the biggest arms and get his workout routine, because obviously it's working for him. So if you want to be financially stable, associate with people who are financially stable. If you want to be better in your faith, then associate with people who are better than you in your faith. If you want to have a good family dynamic, whether it's marriage, whether it's being a father figure to your kids, whatever it is, associate with people who have that already going on in their lives. And through osmosis, through the closeness of that relationship, you'll begin to adopt some of those characteristics. You will learn from that and then make those changes within yourself. It's just inevitable. So if you have aspirations for yourself, then associating with people who have already gotten over those hurdles and who have achieved those levels of successes is something that we should absolutely be doing.
So we're talking about the company you keep. Recently somebody, and we may have said it on this platform, but recently somebody made this point. They said, we're asking for rehabilitation within the system, within the Department of Corrections to be a thing. to be emphasized, to be highlighted, to be endorsed, They're making that point that's what we desire, that's what we'd like to see. And then you get pushback from somebody who has the authority to make those changes. And they say, well, why? Why is that so important? Well, it's important because that influence that we're talking about today, that corrupt or evil or misguided influence is already happening. You see, there's a void, and that's what we're trying to speak into. That's what we're up against here, is that we don't want that void just to be filled with just the normal, everyday routine of the prison environment. Let's war story. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. Hey, when we get out, we should, That's already happening. So it's a question, it's a request that we have. And I think it's very impactful if this decision is made, on a grand scale, to say, make rehabilitation a thing. Make mentorship a thing within the system. Make it be endorsed and encouraged, that these men are speaking positively to each other.
Yeah, I think the greatest direct influence that a person who is in prison can have as far as influencing them positively is absolutely going to come from within. Mm-hmm. You could have all the church people you want and religious people you want coming in from the streets. You could have all the teachers teach all these classes. You could have all that stuff all you want. And all those things are important. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about it. But the greatest influences are going to be from the fellow men who are there. And that's where what you just said, encouraging and fostering, and not just encouraging, but actually fostering it, like putting groundwork and laying foundational work for those things to actually happen with mentorship, with good association, like those things absolutely have to happen. And once that starts to happen and it starts to build and build, that's where that prison culture can actually change. Mm-hmm. It can actually change into a positively influential type of culture, mm-hmm. where more young men and more human beings will have a chance to be able to be guided and mentored into a direction in their life that will positively affect them and their families and their loved ones and their communities.
Mm-hmm. I think it's as simple as this. Boil it down to this. Your loved one who goes to incarceration, here's the question. Would you rather have them come out better or worse than when they went in? That's a very important question. And I think that if we answer in the positive of that question, then I think it's upon us. Unconfined conversation, it's upon us, to lean in to every conversation that's happening about the positive of that, of rehabilitation, of change within the system, of changing the policies, of changing the culture, of praying for the peace and the prosperity of the city. Because if it prospers, then so will the people that are in it. That's a Bible verse, by the way. Jeremiah 29, somewhere in the range of 11. 11 is the most familiar. It says, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and hope. That verse was said to people who were in captivity. And my pastor used to always teach us the context of that verse in which it was said. So captivity, God's people were in captivity for trouble, for disobedience, for rebellion. And this was a moment of correction in their lives. The Department of Corrections. Interesting. But God gives them the word through the prophet. He says, pray for the peace and the prosperity of the city, because if it prospers, then so will you. It's such an awesome thing to see it like that, because that's the way that it is. Like, who wants a prison that's more violent? Who wants a prison that's more dark? and depraved. You know, who wants a prison that is just full of nasty and vile things, you know? Just the opposite. And that's what we're pushing at here is let's ask for change. Let's change the culture. Let's pray for there to be peace within the system to where people begin to think differently about their fellow humankind, your human being, you know, mankind.
So before we close out this episode, Steve, what would you encourage our listeners to not just take away from this episode, but if they know somebody who is incarcerated, which most likely they do, whether it's a family member or whether it's just somebody that they know or somebody that they've chosen to get to know, what would you encourage them as far as what they're able to communicate to their loved one or to their friend who is incarcerated about the company that you keep?
Surround yourself with your future. My friend that I seen yesterday, I didn't know it. I didn't say, you know, I'll see this man in 12 years from now. But through my encouragement in his life, I was able to see him outside living a pretty decent life. Productive, healthy, whole, engaged to be married, you know. Loved, doing well. And reciprocating to me, telling me, hey, thank you. Thank you for talking to me. Thank you for investing in me. So I'm just saying, consider your future. Hang out with the people who will no doubt be somewhat in your future, you know, whether it's visitation on the outside or in your mind or in your heart through the things that they've taught you, the sentiments that they shared with you, the stories that they've given you. Like, hey, this is what I learned. I learned the hard way, but I'm imparting this information to you so that way you'll learn wisely. You'll be like the wise man who says, I need to apply that without learning the hard way, which is the opposite. It's foolish, you know, to say, that brother doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm going to go do it differently. And they find out.
Right. So yeah, associate with your future.
100%.
And so that's what we want to encourage all of you, our listeners and our viewers, to encourage your loved ones and your friends who are incarcerated to associate with your future, because that association will and can and most likely will directly influence the future that they have, and it'll affect the direction that their lives can take. And it all has to be predicated while that person is still inside. If you wait to do it until you're on the outside, it's a hard row to hoe. That's for sure. So to start while you're inside and start making those changes and making those improved associations, the associations of your future, that's absolutely critical. So just please encourage your friends and your loved ones to start thinking about who they associate with while they're inside, and it will pay off in spades when they come out here to the outside, God willing. So for Unconfined Conversations, we want to make sure that we want to encourage all of you to like and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button so that every time that we post, you'll get a notification. Remember, not only are we publishing our long-form episodes, but we're also publishing shorts as well, which you can find on YouTube, Facebook, and X. Also, check us out on your streaming platforms for podcasts like Amazon Music, like iHeartRadio, and also, what's the other one?
I forget.
It's that one that we always forget to talk about, isn't it? Spotify.
Someone called it Shopify. I'm like,
no,
you mean
that's
Spotify?
that's completely different. But check us out on all of our social media platforms, and also make sure to share. If you know somebody who could benefit from what we're talking about on this episode and any of our previous episodes, make sure to share the content with them as well as much as possible. So until next time on Unconfined Conversations, I'm Ryan, this is Steve, and we'll see you next time.